We're back in the service shop. Today we're working on a 2.0 for a Jeep. Something I wanted to go over is we really like the Fox red oil when it comes in shocks that are racing. But one thing that we find that happens when they're put in shocks that aren't racing is the red oil, relatively volatile, toluene, benzene, that kind of stuff. It will make the seals swell and become sticky. So when we get a shock in that is not going to go racing and not going to see 300 degrees, it's going to be in a Jeep, going to sit a lot, not do a lot of high heat cycles. We don't need that oil. We can use I'm not going to say lower grade, but an oil that's not so stable and one that is has more lubricity, and then it doesn't make the seals swell. If we use the red oil in like a 2.0 shock on a Jeep and get it riding good today, a year from today, we'll get the complaint that it gets sticky. It rides harsh. So we have a Jeep set in today. The owner has taken the oil out to be able to cycle them and do some stuff. We're not going to go back in with the red oil. We're going to go with blue. So also, Viton seals, see how that's brown? Viton seals throughout, and they're fine. They work good, unless you're going to be in the cold at all. And if you're going to be in the cold, they don't conform, they don't seal well, they can leak. I've seen lots of cars sit over the winter in a garage and then they'll have puddles of oil on the floor underneath them. At King of the Hammers, we saw several race cars with race seals in them come across on a very cold spell, leak in the trailer or whatever, get to us, and everybody was worried about rebuilding and all that. We run them a little bit, heat them up, the Viton gets warm and they no longer leak. We did check them just to make sure, but it's fairly common for Viton to leak in the cold. So we're going to take the Viton seal out and put blue oil in, which is perfect and just fine for a street use vehicle. So here we go. Blue oil. So I'm going to fill it. How much do I use? I don't know, but I'm going to use the right amount. How do I know? Because I'm going to bleed the shock properly, and there's going to be no air in the shock, and the IFP is going to be in the right place, and therefore we're going to have the right amount of oil. And I don't know how much that amount is, but we're going to have the right amount because everything's going to be proper in the shock. I don't know if you can see, but I've got a 1/4-20 screw in the internal floating piston, and I'm going to cycle it a little bit. I'm going to draw some oil in. And before you do that, you open the low speed. You can't see. Let me get you down here a little bit. Nobody wants to look at my ugly mug anyway. This low speed adjuster, you open it all the way because it is oil past the adjuster on the DSC. And we're just going to cycle. But one thing you do when you cycle is you turn the reservoir like this so that the exit is is up, so the air comes through it first, and you don't just press down hard or you'll get squirted in the eye. You want to just push down slow. Lots of bubbles. And then we'll cycle that a few times. And there, we're pretty happy with that. I'm going to leave the internal floating piston all the way topped. This is called topping the piston. We do this in the field by putting a little nitrogen in the res, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm just going to leave it topped while we cycle. But I will close the bleed, therefore it won't move. You have all the rest of the stuff. If I move this box, then we'll do something. And if we look closely, I've got too much. Who did this? I got too much oil in this, so let's take some oil out. Okay. And we're going to stop you there. So right now I'm just taking the piston off because I want to see what the valving is, and we're going to change the valving. And the little trick there, you saw me actually unwind that. And I unwound that without supporting the shaft at all, because if I'm going to unscrew the eyelet, I want to do it now while unwinding that. It's a good test to make sure the eyelet and the Loctite is still holding. This is a new shock, so I was pretty confident, but I did that. It's just a habit that we do with everything. And then we'll take the piston off. And let me get you down here so you can see this. Blue paper towel, compression stack, piston, rebound stack, nut, washers.
Put this on here and then put that back on.
Pretty close. They're learning. They're not good at copying, but they're good at learning. All right. Smallest shim, pivot shim, 0.8 by 20, 0.95 by 10, 0.95 or 1.1 by 10. 1.35 by 10, 1.425 by 10, 1.6 by 8. Then a flutter, which is a 0.8 by 10, 1.35 by 10, 1.6 by 10. That's compression. Rebound is 8. A flutter of 1.1 by 8, 1.45 by 8, by 10, that's a 1.1 by 10, 0.95, not 1.1, that's 1.1 by 8, 0.95 by 8, and then was a 0.8 by 8. And then you had the backup washer and the 2 shims on top, making sure the nut was flush. So that's shim stack. There's your piston. Cool. I'm going to get a shim stack together and then we'll go back in. Okay, so we got a valve. We take what we call the, while we're here, let's take the Buna seal. Remember not to roll them. It's easier to do that with a bearing off, but I wasn't taking the bearing off. Buna seal, cool. Top out washer or rate plate goes on. There are 2 sides. One is rounded, one is sharp. Sharp side goes toward the shims for more consistency. There you go. Here's our valve stack. We're gonna put, this is called the pivot washer or the pivot shim, the most important shim on the stack, and then the rest go on top. We're doing the compression side right now. Specific Jeep front valve. I'm not going to tell you because I developed it with the customer and it's his. Piston. There are tapered ports or intake ports on each piston. You may not be able to see them, but they're a little bit. You know, when the shaft is in the vise like this, the big scoops go up when it's in the vise. So as the compression is happening, the big scoops are functioning.
Scoops to the sky.
The compression force is going to be bigger in most shocks, not on a 5 car, but most shocks than that. So there we go.
Yeah, Mike's a good friend of ours. So yeah, he's gonna take care of it. If it doesn't go well, obviously we'll take care of it. But he said he's gonna get that all handled out. If there's any confusion or any problems, just give me a call back. I appreciate it. All right, thank you.
When will I have my helmet back?
There's it.
Cool.
Pigtail.
It was the pigtail? It gets unplugged 3 times, 4 times a week, every day. Yeah, yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Can't be, not the helmet's fault.
So, maybe if we can get it back sooner, but Thursday will be up there.
I can get it Thursday on my way through. Okay, so here's something I do. I don't know if other people like that. Backup washer goes on top of the piston, the shims. These are the rebound shims. And then if you put the nut on, it's going to be slightly low. You can still see a little shoulder. The nut may tighten, but the piston won't tighten. If I'm going to put shims, a lot of people put them on top of the backup washer. I don't. I put them underneath. I want the rebound to move as far as it needs to. So I don't have a problem putting them underneath, especially since the backup washer has a rounded side and a square side. The square side should go toward the shims, and so it's going to smash flatter. It's going to smash the stack flatter if it's got more shim, in my opinion. And then, so I put those against the rebound stack. You can't make them bigger. They have to be the same as the pivot washer on the rebound shim. And there's no rate plate, so the shims shouldn't touch anything. So it really doesn't matter. But I feel like I get more consistent rebound damping that way. And then we put it on, and we need to make sure it makes the piston tight, and the piston can't rotate, so then we know we've tightened on the shaft. It's not a good idea. You can do what you want, but it's not a good idea to use Loctite between a stainless steel shaft, because stainless steel galls, and a regular steel nut, because those two are a recipe for galling without helping it. So let's not help it gall any worse. And it is a pinch lock, a pinch nut, so it's not coming off as long as you got it tight, and it is tight. So Buna O-ring, and we'll put the wear band on, and we'll get it put together a little bit clearer. Okay, shaft going in. The oil is about that level right there. How much is it? I don't know. I don't need to know. I'm gonna have it right. Remember, the IFP is up against the end of the reservoir currently, topped. Now, Fox does have a spec on IFP height. In some shocks, you have to set the IFP correctly. You can't do it this way because they're not designed that way. This is an off-road shock. It was done like this forever. It would be just fine. We tap that with the soft hammer to snap the shims open and get rid of air that's trapped underneath the shims. You have to snap them open with impact. They won't snap open just like this. Party trick, pop bubbles. If you've ever done an epoxy table, you know how to do that trick. We will add a little bit of oil here. Oh, you know what I forgot? I bet my employees can tell me what I forgot right now. I bet Daniel's on top of it. Damn boss never works in the shop, doesn't know what he's doing. That's what he's thinking, but he's too nice, he would never say that. Whoever's calling, I'll get you in a minute. All right, and we're gonna need a little more, so. Hi, Zach. Oh, we're going. Okay. Zach called, I had to take that, so sorry. We're putting a little more oil in it. We want some Wiener slider on the O-ring. Go ahead. If you can see, there's a bleeder port right there. I'll get some blue paper towels and let the chef come down, and I got a little too much oil in it because I haven't done these in a while. We're going to let it bleed down through the bleeder port. Usually you aim that at somebody and then push hard and it squirts at them. It's great fun. It's well all out of the desert. That's what I like to do. Once we get the O-ring sitting on top of the body, we'll open the bleed port, also known as low speed, which is a terrible way to describe it, but that's what they named it. Thread a couple threads on that, push it down in, saves your fingers. Then you push the rest of the way in. One thing you want to do for sure here, get the oil out from underneath. Here, you don't have to, but what happens is you leave it there and then your customer calls. My shock's leaking. It's not leaking, there's just some residual. But it certainly does look like it's leaking, so you can't blame them. Now we need the snap ring. This guy is messy. I don't know why we let him work here. That's me, not him. He's good. I'm messy. The old wire ring. They scare you to death. They scare you to death looking at them and see how fragile they look until you actually try to press one apart and the whole body comes apart. They're fine. Then we're going to push everything down. We don't like doing that because we don't have an end cap in this. So let's put an end cap back in it. You should be able to put an end cap in easy. If you don't, there's a problem. Again, another wire ring. Don't use a round wire ring where a snap ring goes, and don't use a snap ring where a wire ring goes. There's a little advice from me. We're just going to push it down all the way now just to make sure things are working. We'll give it just a little bump with nitrogen. Okay, now the bearing's seated. We can check the snap ring, wiring, it's good. Push it in, feels good. Topped out, wait longer than you think you should. And that's good. Right here, stop looking. This happens a lot on these caps. That O-ring is destroyed. We want another one. What is it? 012. Is it a 0? Nope. It's going to be a 013. 013? Ah. Is there something weird? It's 14. And then 014 O-ring, and I put a little bit of grease on it just because they can seize in there. And it is the seal for the Schrader, because the Schrader thread does not have that red seal you're used to. That is the seal, so you want that O-ring to be in good shape. Check those. If they've sat very long, they're going to be broken. Okay, we're just going to make sure everything works. It feels to me like this. It's not tight against that O-ring. When you can't tighten the bearing, you have to get the bearing tight. So what you do is you move it down to the vise. In your aluminum jaws, you squeeze it, and then you can tighten it. You don't want it coming off. It's a bad thing when that cap comes off. Tighten the set screw. In Strya, they call it a grub screw because it looks like a grub. At least that's what they told me. Clean up our mess. Thanks to Daniel. It's not too big a mess because I forgot to put the diaper on. And one done. Between the 6 or 7 phone calls and the other things I did, that took me like almost an hour, but it should be like 15 minutes.